Camille Whitfield stood before the great stone fireplace in her father's study, hands trembling, eyes red. On the desk behind her lay a stack of 47 aging envelopes, edges yellowed, bound in twine. She threw them into the fire. Wesley Halloran stood 3 steps away. He did not shout. He whispered only one name. Eleanor. Camille turned sharply. "Don't say my mother's name in this house." Smoke curled upward. The burning edge of one envelope unfurled a single line of handwriting. "Camille, my brave girl." She did not see it. Wesley saw it, and he understood. She had just burned the last voice of the mother she believed had forgotten her. 8 years earlier, Eleanor Whitfield had walked into Halloran Bindery on a wet October afternoon. She was 64 then, silver-haired, her coat damp at the shoulders. Wesley had been at the back, gluing the spine of a Civil War journal. He came out wiping his hands on a rag. She set a small wooden box on his counter. Walnut, lacquered, no larger than a loaf of bread. "When Camille turns 36, she said, "not a day before. You give this to her. Harold cannot know. No one can know." Wesley nodded. He did not ask why. Eleanor had always trusted him to keep what she could not. She paid for the binding she had no real need for and left. 2 months later, she was dead. Now, 8 years and 4 months past her funeral, Wesley drove up the long gravel road to Whitfield Estate carrying the same wooden box. He was 40 years old. His daughter Juno was waiting at home with her grandmother. The November sky over Asheville was the color of old pewter. Pearl Ainsley, the Whitfield housekeeper, opened the front door. She had not seen Wesley in nearly a decade. Her face went pale. "She's in the study," Pearl said. Her voice cracked. She did not say more. Camille received him standing. She did not offer tea. She did not offer a chair. 4 months had passed since her father's burial, and the company was hemorrhaging $30 million no one could explain. She had grown used to men arriving with boxes, asking for things they had no right to. "My mother asked me to keep this for you," Wesley said. He set the box on her desk. "I'm late. I should have brought it last month, on your birthday." Camille opened the lid. 47 handwritten envelopes. No postmarks. Her mother's looping script on every one. Her stomach went cold. She thought immediately of blackmail, of forged love letters her father might have written, surfacing now to ruin what little reputation the company had left. She picked up her phone and called her attorney. Garrett Voss, the chairman of the board, arrived within 20 minutes. He stepped into the study, saw Wesley, and his face shifted for half a second before he caught himself. "Burn them," Garrett said quietly to Camille. "Don't read them. If you read them, you'll never sleep again." "This is your mother's handwriting," Wesley said. "Open one. Just one." Camille began to cry then, for the first time in 4 months. It was not soft crying. It was rage with water in it. "My mother has been dead for 8 years. If she had anything to say, she said it while she was alive." She threw the bundle into the fire. Wesley did not move to stop her. When the flames took hold, he bent and picked up a single charred fragment that had fallen short of the grate. He slipped it into his coat pocket. Pearl, in the doorway, saw him do it. Her eyes filled. When Wesley turned to leave, Camille noticed something she had not expected. He was not crying. He was not angry. There was only a quiet ache in his face that she had not seen on any man since the morning her father died. It unsettled her. She hated that it unsettled her. Wesley drove back to the bindery in silence. The shop was dark. Juno was already at her grandmother's house for the weekend. He sat at his work table, switched on the brass lamp, and laid the burned fragment under its yellow light. 3 lines were still legible. "Every autumn, remember that I always..." He left it there and did not sleep. The next morning, the board of directors of Whitfield Paper Mills convened in the glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor. Garrett Voss spoke first. He proposed selling 35% of the company to a holding group out of Shanghai. He used the word stabilization 7 times in 9 minutes. Camille listened. She did not vote. She told the room she needed 48 hours. Back in her office, she closed the door and opened her laptop. She typed the name Wesley Halloran into the search bar, expecting a criminal record, a bankruptcy, a string of small claims cases. She found a Forbes article instead. 2018, the man who said no to Whitfield. Wesley Halloran turns down $400 million CFO offer to remain a bookbinder. She read it once. She read it twice. She read it a third time. Eleanor Whitfield, then 61 years old, had offered Wesley Halloran the position of chief financial officer of the entire Whitfield holding group. He had declined. He had given no public reason. In the article, Eleanor had said only this: "Wesley is the one person I trust absolutely. He knows why I need him where he is." Camille closed the laptop. Her hands were cold. She called Pearl into her office. Pearl came, slow and careful, her left hand pressed to her chest. "You knew about the letters," Camille said. Pearl said nothing. "Tell me what you knew." "I cannot," Pearl whispered. "Your father had me sign things. I signed because I needed to keep my work. Ask him. Ask Mr. Halloran. Do not ask me." She paused at the door. "You should not have burned them, Camille." That afternoon, Camille drove herself downtown. She parked outside a narrow brick storefront with peeling gold lettering. Halloran Bindery. Established 1996. The bell over the door rang as she stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Leather, beeswax, paper aged in cedar. Tall shelves ran along both walls, packed with books at every stage of repair. Late sun came through the front window in long bars. A girl with brown braids was sitting cross-legged on the floor near the counter, drawing with colored pencils. She looked up. "Dad," she called, not loudly. "The lady with sad eyes is here." Camille froze. She was not used to being read so quickly, certainly not by a child. Wesley came out from the back room, his palms streaked with glue. He did not seem surprised. "You read the Forbes piece." She nodded. "Why did my mother trust you?" "Because I could keep a secret. That's all." "What was in the letters?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I never opened anyone else's letters, Miss Whitfield. I held them. 8 years. I did not break a seal." "Then how do you know they were for me, and not part of some long con?" Wesley walked to the work table at the back, returned, and laid the burned fragment on the counter between them. "Camille, my brave girl," she knew the hand. There was no mistaking it. She sat down on the wooden stool by the counter, and for the first time since her father's funeral she cried the way a child cries. Juno walked over with one of her drawings and pressed it gently into Camille's hand. A house, a tree, a woman with long silver hair beside it. Eleanor, sketched by a child who had never met her, by a father who had not forgotten her. Camille understood then, in the dim light of a stranger's shop, that she had burned 46 letters from the mother she had believed had stopped thinking of her years ago. She had burned the last voice of a dead woman, and the man who had stood watching her do it had once refused $400 million to keep that voice safe. But there was still the fragment. One sentence had survived, and Eleanor Whitfield was not a woman who wrote only one message. Camille did not drive home. She stayed at the bindery until the streetlights came on. Wesley made coffee in a battered French press and set a cup beside her without asking. Juno had been carried to a small back room and tucked under a quilt. The shop was quiet, except for the radiator clicking against the cold. "What was she like?" Camille asked. "When she wrote them?" Wesley did not answer at once. He went to a low shelf, took down a leather ledger, and opened it to a page marked 19 Autumn. He turned it so she could see his own neat handwriting in the margin. "She came every Thursday for 6 months. She had a small stroke in May of that year. She knew she did not have long. She wrote you 1 letter every week. She told me more than once. I cannot say these things to Camille in person. Harold will not allow it, but she will need me when I am gone." Camille's voice broke. "Why didn't she mail them?" "She was afraid your father would intercept the post. She trusted me to hold them." Camille felt a small, clean fracture inside her chest. She had always believed her parents' marriage was the one steady thing she had inherited. "Why did my mother not trust my father?" Wesley was quiet a long time. "That is not for me to answer. I was the keeper. I was not the witness." She stood to leave. At the door she stopped, hand on the frame. "Do you remember anything she wrote? Any of it?" "1 sentence. She read it out loud while she was writing. She asked me if it sounded right." He closed his eyes. "Brave doesn't mean unafraid. Brave means doing the thing your father told you not to." Camille did not move. When she was 8 years old, her mother had crouched in front of her in the wings of a small concert hall and said exactly those words before her first piano competition. She had never told anyone that sentence. Not her father, not her husband, before the divorce. Not a single therapist in 15 years. She turned back from the door and sat down again. She cried without hiding it this time. Wesley did not touch her. He did not speak. He set a box of tissues on the table beside her and walked away to wash a cup that did not need washing. Outside, The first snow of the season began to fall, light and uncertain. "Is there anything else you remember?" she asked, when she could speak. "There is a studio," Wesley said. "Your mother's. It has been locked since the day she died. She told me, the letters are part 1, Camille. The studio is part 2. Your father kept the key. I never had it." Camille lifted her head. "I have my father's keys." For the first time in 4 months, she had something to seek out instead of something to defend against. She did not drive back to the estate that night. She drove to a hotel on Charlotte Street and lay awake fully clothed until dawn. She could not stand to be in a house with a fireplace. Across town, in a dark shop on Wall Street, Wesley sat at his work table with the charred fragment under the lamp. He spoke once into the silence. "Eleanor, I'm sorry. I came too late." They met at Whitfield Estate just after sunrise. Pearl opened the door without speaking, but her eyes carried the look of a woman who had been waiting 8 years for this morning. The three of them climbed to the 3rd floor. The corridor smelled faintly of cedar polish. At the end of it was a single oak door, dark with age, sealed with a brass plate engraved E.W. Camille tried her father's key. It did not fit. "He changed the lock in 2019, Pearl whispered. "He did not want anyone going in." Camille struck the door with the flat of her hand. The wood did not move. The door had been built to outlast the house. "Don't break it," Wesley said. "There is another way. Your mother had this door made at an old shop in Black Mountain. I know the man." They drove 40 minutes east through gray hills and stone-walled pastures to a tin-roofed workshop at the edge of a state forest. Hollis Aldridge was 80 years old. His hands knotted, his eyes pale and clear. He looked up from his bench when Wesley came in and smiled as if no time had passed. "You're still here after all these years," he said. He opened a small cabinet beneath his work table and brought out a brass key on a leather cord. "She paid me for 2. She said one would come back for the other someday." They drove back to Asheville in silence. The key turned in the brass plate with a soft, clean click. The door swung inward. The studio smelled of paper and pencil shavings and the absence of footsteps. A writing desk stood by the window. A small, hand-cranked paper press sat in the corner under a linen cover. The light came thin and gold through curtains nobody had drawn back in 8 years, and on the desk, laid out in a wooden tray, were 47 small notebooks bound in cream paper, each one labeled by hand. Camille stepped forward. She lifted the first one. Her fingers shook. "Eleanor copied them," Wesley said quietly. "She did not tell me. She made fair copies of every letter she wrote." Camille opened the first notebook. "Camille, my brave girl. If you are reading these, I am no longer here. But there are things I must say. Things your father will never allow me to say while I am alive. I have to ask your forgiveness in advance. I lied to you. I lied to you by silence." She read on. Her face emptied. Eleanor wrote that Harold Whitfield was not Camille's biological father. Camille's real father had been a musician Eleanor had loved before her engagement, a cellist who had died in a winter highway accident when Eleanor was 2 months pregnant. Harold had known. He had agreed to marry her on one condition. The story was never to be spoken again, in any room of any house they would share. Camille sat down on the floor of the studio. She read it twice. She put the notebook down. "You knew," she said. "Yes. All this time. Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it was not mine to tell. It was hers." Camille looked at him then, and for the first time, the suspicion left her eyes. She saw only the weight of a man who had carried a secret for nearly a decade and had never, not once, traded it for anything. She kept reading. Each letter was a single year of a life that had never been spoken to her. The 8th one made her laugh, briefly, through her tears. The 12th one made her stop breathing. "Be careful of Garrett," Eleanor had written. "I saw him alter ledgers in the spring of 2016. I did not have time to confront him. If you ever find this, you will know where to look." Camille set the notebook down very gently, as though it might break. $30 million. The hole in the books her father had blamed on the market. She had been looking at the wrong man for 4 months. Camille took 6 of the notebooks back to her office and locked them in the safe behind her desk. She did not move against Garrett directly. She hired a forensic accounting firm out of Charlotte, on Wesley's recommendation. The senior partner had been one of Eleanor's old friends, retired but willing. He agreed to work nights, off the books. Garrett sensed the shift the way an old predator senses a change in the wind. He pushed harder for the Shanghai sale. He scheduled an emergency board meeting. Camille postponed it on a pretext of revised valuations. She bought herself 10 days. He came to her office unannounced one Tuesday afternoon. He closed the door behind him. He did not sit. "I hear there's a bookbinder downtown, spending a great deal of time near you," he said. His voice was light. "Be careful, Camille. Dowry hunters don't always wear warning labels." She did not flinch. "Thank you for the advice, Garrett." He left. Camille sat very still for a long time. She understood, now, that Garrett knew exactly who Wesley was, and exactly what Wesley might know. She went to the bindery that evening. The bell rang as she entered. Juno was at the front counter with a piece of construction paper. She had drawn a man and a woman walking under an umbrella holding hands. The woman had long hair. The man had glasses. Neither of them was labeled, but the drawing was not subtle. Camille felt heat rise to her face. Wesley walked in from the back, glanced at the drawing without expression, and gently moved it to a shelf. Juno laughed and skipped away to find a book. Camille told him about Garrett's visit. Wesley nodded slowly. "Your mother was afraid of him too. She hid documentation somewhere in the studio. She never told me where." They drove to the estate that night and searched. Pearl brought them tea and sat in a chair by the door with her hand at her chest. It was Camille who found it, almost by accident, when she lifted a small framed pastel from the wall to look at the back of the canvas. A leather notebook had been taped behind the frame. Inside was Eleanor's private log of Garrett Voss's financial misconduct, from the spring of 2014 to the autumn of 2018. Dates, amounts, account numbers, signed photographs of altered ledger pages. Enough for criminal indictment. "Why didn't she go public?" Camille whispered. "She had the second stroke before she could. The week before she died, she told me, if I cannot finish this, wait for Camille. Only Camille can finish this." Camille looked at Wesley across the small studio. She understood then, something she had been refusing to understand. Her mother had not trusted Harold. Her mother had not trusted Garrett. Her mother had trusted her, 8 years out, to be the one who could carry it through. She cried for the third time since meeting him. He passed her the tissues again, and did not touch her, and his hand was unsteady when he set the box down. "Thank you," she said, "for keeping your promise." He only nodded. She drove back to the hotel that night. The snow was thicker now. She sat at the small desk in her room and began to write a plan. Her mother had left her a weapon. A bookbinder had held it for 8 years without ever turning it for himself, and Garrett Voss had just realized, too late, that his new opponent was not Camille Whitfield. It was a woman who had been dead for 8 years, and had spent the last 6 months of her life preparing for exactly this morning. Camille needed a living witness. The notebooks were strong, but a court would want a voice. "Pearl," Wesley said, "she saw more than you think." They drove together to Pearl's small clapboard house on the north edge of Asheville. She opened the door in her cardigan, looked at the two of them on her porch, and stepped aside. She brought out a tin of nitroglycerin tablets and set them on the kitchen table where she could reach them. She sat. She folded her hands. "I cannot testify," she said. "Your father had me sign non-disclosure papers. Garrett knows my heart is bad. He told me last winter, almost in passing, that he hoped my insurance kept up with my medication. He said it gently. That was what frightened me." Camille reached across the table and put her hand on Pearl's. "Whatever you can give me, I will protect you for it. You will not lose your insurance. You will not lose your home." Pearl rose slowly and walked back into a small bedroom. She returned carrying a steel lockbox. Inside was a single cassette tape, in a paper sleeve marked in Eleanor's hand. November 2018. "Your mother gave me this 2 weeks before her last stroke," Pearl said. "She told me, if Camille ever needs to know everything, not only about Garrett, but about Harold, you give her this. I have been waiting 8 years to give it to you." Camille took the tape home that night. She did not own a cassette player. Wesley owned 3. They drove to the bindery. Juno was asleep upstairs. The tape was 14 minutes long. Eleanor had recorded, secretly, a conversation between Harold Whitfield and Garrett Voss in Harold's study one winter afternoon. The two men had not known. Harold knew Garrett was stealing. Garrett had known for years that Camille was not Harold's biological daughter. The arrangement had been simple. Garrett would not breathe a word of the parentage. Harold would not look too closely at the books. Each man bought the other's silence. Camille listened to it 3 times. She did not cry. She was beyond crying now. She had crossed into a colder country. She called Wesley near midnight from the hotel. "I need you tomorrow," she said. "In the boardroom, I'll be there." She did not say more. She did not hang up either. The silence on the line stretched almost a full minute. Then, very softly, she said, "Thank you for not walking away." "Eleanor wouldn't have," Wesley said. That night in the apartment above the bindery, Juno got up to use the bathroom. The hallway light was off. She saw her father standing at the window with the phone still in his hand, looking out at the street lamps. She walked over and wrapped her small arms around his leg. "Dad, is the lady going to be okay?" He set his hand on her hair. "She's almost okay, sweetheart. Almost." The Whitfield boardroom held 12 directors around a long walnut table. Garrett sat at one end. Camille sat at the other. Wesley stood quietly along the back wall with the steel lockbox at his feet. He wore a clean gray shirt. He had not slept. Garrett opened. "I move we vote today on the Wuxi Group acquisition of 35% equity." Camille tilted her head. "Before we vote, I have 3 documents to share with the board." She opened her case. The first was the independent forensic audit. It showed that Garrett Voss had moved $47 million through 3 shell companies registered in Delaware over the past 12 years. The second was Eleanor Whitfield's handwritten field log, beginning in 2014, with dates, sums, and signed photographic evidence. The third was the cassette tape, transferred to digital, with a verified chain of custody from Pearl Ainsley. Camille pressed play. The board listened. At the 4-minute mark, the chairwoman, a 70-year-old former senator named Margaret Pickering, leaned forward. "I know that voice," she whispered. "I worked beside her for 30 years. Garrett went the color of old paper. He stood up. "This is fabricated." The bookbinder forged the materials. Camille's voice did not rise. "Wesley Halloran has not touched a single one of these documents in 8 years. Each has been authenticated through paper forensics by a laboratory in Atlanta. My mother prepared for this morning." Garrett turned and pointed at Wesley. "You don't know anything, bookbinder." Wesley spoke quietly. "Your mother said you would react exactly this way." He had meant Eleanor. Garrett had not expected to hear her named in a sentence about him. He sat down without meaning to. The board voted. 11-1. Garrett was removed from the chairmanship and from every officer position he held. 2 commercial fraud investigators arrived within the hour. As they led him toward the door, Garrett broke. He turned in the doorway. He pointed at Camille. He was screaming, "You are not a Whitfield. You are the daughter of some dead musician on a back road. Your father knew. Your mother knew. I knew." The room went silent. Camille did not look away. She stood up. She placed both hands flat on the table. "Yes," she said. Her voice was even. "I am the daughter of Eleanor Whitfield. That is the only fact that matters. My mother chose to build this company. I will choose to save it." Margaret Pickering stood first. The rest of the board followed. Garrett was let out. Camille walked from the room in silence. Wesley followed several paces behind. In the hallway, where the long windows showed the river below, she stopped and put one hand against the wall. Her shoulders shook once, then twice. 8 years of truth had broken open in 12 minutes. Wesley stepped beside her. He set one hand on her shoulder. Lightly. The way a person sets down a thing that might break. She did not move away. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. "You are the woman your mother trusted to do this. That is who you are." She let her head tilt, just enough that her temple almost rested against the back of his hand. Then she remembered herself and straightened. The moment had lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Both of them knew it had happened. She walked out into the elevator lobby first. He followed. Neither of them spoke. A week later, the newspapers had run the story to the bone. Garrett Voss was under indictment in 3 federal districts. Camille Whitfield was the unquestioned chief executive of Whitfield Paper Mills. The Shanghai deal was dead. The company's stock had stabilized within 3 days. She was not happy. There were still 46 letters she would never read. On a Saturday afternoon in mid-December, she drove to the bindery. Juno was at the front counter cutting paper turkeys for an early Thanksgiving display. The shop smelled of cinnamon. Wesley was somewhere in the back. Juno saw Camille and ran to the door. "Lady, Dad's making apple pie. Real one." Camille laughed. It was the first real laugh she had heard from her own mouth in a long time. Wesley came out wiping flour from his hands on a striped towel. He was not surprised to see her. She handed him a small box. Inside was a fresh notebook bound in cream linen, with end papers cut from Whitfield mill stock. "I want you to restore the charred fragment," she said. "Mount it inside, and then write down everything you remember about my mother. Every gesture, every sentence, every Thursday. I want Juno to read it one day." Wesley took the box. His hands shook lightly. "Are you sure you want Juno to know about her?" "Yes. My mother never had a grandchild, but if it can be done at all, I want Juno to know her." The moment opened between them. There was no kiss. There was no declaration. There was only a woman inviting a stranger's child into the line of her own dead mother, and a man standing very still, accepting the responsibility. Camille understood it then. There were things that did not need letters to be passed on. Her mother was alive in the way Wesley stood quietly. Her mother was alive in the way Juno drew her heart maps. Eleanor had built more than envelopes. Juno came over with a fresh drawing, 3 figures this time: a man with glasses, a small girl in braids, and a woman with long silver hair, holding the girl's hand. "This is Eleanor," she said. "I drew her from Dad's stories. She liked apples, right?" Camille nodded. The tears came warm and slow. She loved apples more than anything. They ate the pie at the small kitchen table behind the shop. Nobody called it a family. The shape of one was in the room anyway. When Camille left, Wesley walked her to her car. The snow was falling in slow, patient flakes. She turned at the driver's door. "Wesley." It was the first time she had used his first name. "Yes. Did my mother say anything, anywhere, about hoping I would find someone different from my father?" Wesley looked at her for a long moment. "She only said this. I hope she finds someone who believes in her the way I believe in her." Camille nodded. She did not answer. She got in the car. She drove away. She had found the truth. She had saved the company. But the 46 letters her mother had died writing were still ash in a stone fireplace at the estate. And then, she found the one thing not even Wesley had known about. She drove back to the studio alone on a quiet weekday morning. She did not know why. She wanted to sit in the room and listen to it breathe. She pulled out the bottom drawer of the desk. She had not opened it before. Inside, behind a stack of blank paper, was a single envelope, thicker than the others, sealed with red wax. The front bore one line in Eleanor's careful hand. "Letter 48, for the keeper who will hand them to Camille." Camille stared at it. Wesley had said 47. This was the 48th. She broke the seal. It was not addressed to her. It was addressed to Wesley. "Dear Wesley, if you are reading this, Camille has found the studio. She has read the 47. There is one thing I never said to you while I was alive. You were not only the keeper of my letters, you were the one man I had hoped, one day, to introduce to my daughter if I had lived. You and she are the same kind of quiet. I have no right to arrange a life, but if the world happens to set you in the same room someday, let me say my last sentence as a mother and as a friend. You deserve to be loved, Wesley, and my daughter deserves to be loved by someone who does not need a reason." Camille read it 3 times. She sat down on the floor of the studio with the envelope held against her chest. She did not know whether to give it to him. It was his letter, not hers. But he had held 47 of hers for 8 years without breaking a seal, she decided. She drove to the bindery early the next morning, before Juno had woken. Wesley was at the kitchen sink, pouring coffee into a chipped white cup. She set the envelope on the table between them. "My mother left this. For you." He looked at the seal. "I never knew there was one." "Neither did I." He sat down. He opened it. He read. His hands shook lightly. And then, for the first time since she had met him, Camille watched Wesley Halloran cry. He made no sound. The tears moved down his face, the way rain moves down a window in early spring. He set the letter down. "Eleanor was always one step ahead of me." Camille did not speak. She sat across from him and let the kitchen be quiet. Outside, a delivery truck passed in low gear. A pigeon settled on the windowsill and walked along it. After a while, Wesley said, "I was never going to say anything. I was afraid you would think I had been arranging this all along." "I know you weren't," Camille said. "That is why." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. He reached across the table. She placed her hand on top of his. She did not grip it. She only let her palm rest over his knuckles. It was the first time either of them had chosen the other, rather than been pushed toward the other by something that had happened. The coffee cooled between them. Neither of them moved to drink it. 6 months later, it was spring in Asheville. Camille had restructured Whitfield Paper Mills from the inside out. 20% of the company's annual profits now funded a foundation she had named after her mother. The Eleanor Whitfield Foundation provided scholarships in handcraft education for children in rural Appalachia. The board had voted on the name unanimously. Halloran Bindery had taken over the storefront next door. Wesley taught Saturday classes for children. Juno was his quiet assistant, 10 years old now, taller, the braids replaced by a single ponytail that flicked when she laughed. Juno called Camille Cam, not mother, not aunt, just Cam. Camille had grown to love the sound. Wesley had finished the notebook. The charred fragment lay mounted under glass on the first page. After it came, everything he had remembered. Every Thursday. Every cup of black tea Eleanor had taken with no sugar. Every quiet sentence she had said while watching the snow fall outside his shop window. Camille read the notebook on Friday evenings, alone in the studio. The studio had been reopened, dusted, given new curtains. It was a reading room now, for the three of them. She did not cry anymore when she read it. She smiled more than she would have believed possible. She understood, finally, that the 46 letters in the fire had not been the total loss she had carried for half a year. Her mother had built a duplicate in this room, and more than that, her mother had built a person. Wesley had not replaced the letters. He was the part of Eleanor that paper could not hold. On a Friday evening in late April, Wesley cooked at the small kitchen table behind the shop. Juno set the table. She set out 4 places. Camille looked at the 4th chair. "Why 4? One for Eleanor," Juno said simply. "She always eats with us on Fridays." Camille set a slice of apple on the 4th plate. Wesley did not say anything. He only nodded. After dinner, Juno fell asleep on the small sofa under a quilt. Wesley draped a sweater over her shoulders. He and Camille went out onto the front porch and sat side by side on the wooden bench under the spring stars. The dogwood at the corner of the yard was in early bloom. "I still remember the night I burned them," Camille said. "I will never forgive myself." "You do not have to," Wesley said. "Eleanor forgave you in the letter you did not read." "Which one?" "The first one. The opening line. Camille, my brave girl, I forgave you before you needed forgiving." Camille was quiet for a long time. Then she let her head rest against his shoulder. Lightly, no weight in it. He did not move. The snow had been gone for weeks. The first magnolia on the tree by the porch had opened that morning. Neither of them had been looking for someone to share a porch with under spring stars in Asheville, but somewhere between the ashes and the 47th letter, Eleanor Whitfield had built them a doorway, and they had both, quietly, walked through.